In this presentation, we will set up customers and their beginning balances. In other words, their beginning balances will be included in the accounts receivable on the financial statements. Let's get started with Sage 50 Cloud Accounting. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We're in the customers and sales section. We're going to be opening up and going to that setup process again, which is in the file dropdown. In the file dropdown, we're going to be dropping down to the Sage setup or the setup guide. We're going to go to the setup guide, and we're going to be up here in the customers now. So we're going to go through the setup guide for the customers. So we're going to be opening up those customers. Remember, our objective for the customers then, if we go back over to our beginning balances, we need the accounts receivable balance of the 20,500. That's what we need on the financial statements as of the beginning of the time period, and we need that supported by the customers who owes us that money, so that we can also break down reports, basically a customer report or an aging report based on who owes us the money. Here we go. A customer is an individual or organization that purchases products or services from your company. In this case, you can enter as many of your customers as you want. If you don't set up all your customers now, you can always do more later. So obviously, when we think about our beginning balances, we may enter a whole list of customers, and if we have a setup of customers, we may want to do that. However, at this point, we're going to enter the customers we need to get those beginning balances in there. And then obviously, as you make more sales in the future, more invoices, more sales receipts, you can add the customers as you go. How much information you need per customer will depend on, what type of industry you are in. Would you like to enter customers now? We're going to say yes, we would. We're going to enter some customers now. No customers have been set up for your company. Click Add New Customer button to add customers. After you set up the first customer, a list of your customers will appear below. When you're done entering customers, click Next to continue. So I'm going to go ahead and add the customers right in our customer window. Again, we can add customers later. We'll discuss how to add more customers as we go, both in terms of the customer field as well as, or in the accounts receivable field, or the customer cycle field, as well as when we start to input forms, data input forms, we can think about how to enter customers there as well. Okay, so we have some minimum information, and then of course the detailed information. I'm going to say our first our first customer is going to be Anderson Guitars. Now the minimum information is of course just the customer ID. Then we have a lot more data that we could be populating for that customer down below, which would include the contact information. I'm just going to review through the contact information. I'm not going to enter all the contact information, just to get an idea of what is included within it. It will depend on the type of industry that we're in terms of how much more customer information do we need. If we have few clients and they're large clients, then of course we want a lot of contact information. If we have a lot of clients, we're making sales a lot, but we don't have a lot of repeat clients for some type of industry that we're just basically making one-time type of sales, then maybe we don't need as much information for the customer contact information. Contact information then, we have the account number, billing, we have the address, of course, telephone number, fax, email, so standard kind of contacting information. Second contact, reference, mailing. Then we have the contacts, so within the contacts we can put more contact information here, the history, and then the sales info on it. So we may have a sales rep, the default account that it's going to be going to is 4,000. So when we make an invoice or a sales receipt, if it's not driven by a inventory item, which it typically is an inventory or service item, then it'll be driven by this. In other words, if we made an invoice and we didn't put an inventory item but just a description, then it would default to this as the sales account, which is basically the revenue account. But usually we're going to be entering a sales item, and therefore this item will typically be irrelevant in those cases. So I'm going to then say payment and credit, so we can hit the payment and credit information. And again, I'm not going to put this information in at this time. We're just going to hit the minimum so that we can then populate the beginning balances. So I'm going to say save on this. So let's save it. And then let's do a new one. So we'll say new, or I could say save and new at the same time. So save and new, and then we're going to have another one, and this is going to be Jones. So I'm going to say Jones, and I'm going to put that on the name down below too. And again, I'm not going to enter more information. I'm just going to use this in order to populate the beginning balances. So that's all I'm going to enter for now. Same kind of idea with regards to the data input field with the contact information. So I'm going to say save and new. We'll add one more, and this is going to be Smith Guitars. So this is going to be our customer. These are the 3 people that actually owe us money at this point in time. So I'm going to put that in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that. So I'm going to say, let's save that. And then I'm going to close this out. So let's close this one out then. And so there's our customer information. So we have our 3 customers there. Now if I'm go through the rest of the process, I'm going to then go to the beginning balances, right? So we've got our customers set up. I'm going to go next. Before you begin using Sage 50 to invoice customers, we recommend that you enter the amount of money that is owed to you. We refer to this amount as the customer beginning balance. The beginning balance can be entered as one lump sum or as individual invoices. Do any of the customers currently owe you money? In accounting, this is sometimes referred to as an open invoice. So yes, we do. Yes, but I already entered the balance. I'm going to say yes, we do. We haven't entered the balance yet. So now you can enter the amounts owed to you by the customers you just entered. Click the Enter Customer Beginning Balance button below. When the window opens, double-click on the customer name, then enter the unpaid invoice that this customer owes you. So when you are done entering customer beginning balances, click Next. So we're going to say, all right, beginning balances. Let's do that. It's going to be great. So then we're going to say the first one, we're going to have the beginning balance over here, which will be, I'm going to double click on Anderson. So Anderson, and here's the data for Anderson. Now I'm just going to make the date. I'm going to put in a date. This would be the invoice date, but I'm going to put it as of 12/31/19. And what I want to do is just make sure it's before the cutoff date of the current time period that we're in, so that if the system records this as a journal entry to basically an income account, it happens last period and then rolls into retained earnings for the current period. So I'm going to give an invoice number 1010, date 12/31/19, amount 5,000. Then the account is going to be 1,100, which is going to be that accounts receivable account. So then I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to close it here. I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to go back into it. I'm going to go to the second one. I'm going to do the same thing. I want to make the date here 12/31/19. So invoice number 1020, date 12/31/19, amount 7,500, go into the account of accounts receivable 1,100. So let's go ahead and save that, and then we'll close that one out. One more time, we'll go into this one more time for Smith Guitars, and then we're going to say the date is going to be 12/31/19. So we have the 1030, 12/31/19, amount 8,000, 1,100 on the account. Once again, the accounts receivable account. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, close that out, and then close that. Oh, let's go back into there. I'm going to go to the customers, and let's see if we can go back to where we were. I'm going to say, all right, we've done that. We've done that. Okay, so now we're going to continue here. We'll continue on. So we're at the beginning balances. Beginning balances has been entered. And so we could see those here. We're at the 20,500. That's got to increase the accounts receivable by that 20,500. The other, hopefully, is going to end up in retained earnings in some way, shape, or form. So then it says, Sage 50 allows you to set default payment, credit, and finance charge terms for all your customers at once. You can override the default individual settings for customers. Here are some of the overall customer defaults that have been set up for you. So payment terms, net due in 30 days. So typically when we make an invoice, then we expect payment within the 30 days. That's a good default. Credit limit 2,500. Credit status notify over limit. Age invoices by due date, not invoice date. So we'll keep those as the defaults. If we wanted to change them, we can go to the change here. I'm going to keep them as the default. Sales tax. Do you collect sales tax from your customers? If yes, you'll need to set Sage 50 how you'd like to collect taxes on sales to your customer. Setting up the taxes is a 3-step process. We'll walk you through the setup. Yes, I collect tax. So we're going to say, yes, we collect tax to the customer. So I'm going to say next. And then it says, first you'll need to set up a vendor to whom you send sales tax checks. This vendor is typically the government agency or bank where you send your sales tax check. So sales tax in the US is going to be, the value added tax is going to be by state. So by state, we'll typically have the sales tax, not a federal tax. If example, your state, your department, your revenue, click the Setup Tax Vendor button to add a vendor. When you are done setting up the vendor, click Next. So I'm going to say, all right, let's set up the vendor here, opening up the vendor section, and I'm just going to call it California Tax Collector. I'm just going to make it a sales tax. Obviously, this is a mock thing. You're going to want to see wherever your location is, who you owe the sales tax to, and set up your sales tax. Same kind of contact information down below. The minimum that we're going to need for a vendor will be the vendor information up top. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And valid account must be selected before continuing. All right, so we need a valid account. The expense account is going to be then, I'm going to pick the sales tax payable, because typically when we pay it off, it would be going to the sales tax payable account. So I'm going to pick that one and say okay. And let's see if they let me save it now. I'm going to say save. You're going to let me save it now. So then I'll close this back out. So I'm going to close this back out, go back to our window. So now it says, first you'll need to set up a vendor. This vendor is typically the government agency. So click Setup. We did that. When you are done setting up the vendor for the sales tax, click the Next button. So there it is. So we're good there. Okay, let's go Next. And now it says Step 2. Now you'll set up the sales tax. To set up sales tax, you need to run the sales tax wizard. The wizard walks you through setting up the sales tax that are collected for your customer. The wizard collects information about how your sales tax is calculated, who you send the taxes you've collected to, and which account you want to use track the sales tax. Once you have set up the sales tax, they can be assigned to customers or invoice or other form. Click Sales Tax Wizard. Okay. Run the Sales Tax Wizard, setting up our sales tax. Sales tax are amounts charged by the state, county, locality, or other agency on items that you sell to your customers. Most service-based businesses do not collect sales tax. So in the U.S., if you're a service-based business, you typically don't have the sales tax. And then if you have inventory, you typically do. And it's going to be subject to state and local taxes as opposed to the federal income tax. If you sell items, you will need to set up how these sales tax are calculated. What would you like to do? Set up a new sales tax or edit an existing sales tax. We're going to set up a new one. It's going to be our first sales tax. Okay, a sales tax is comprised of one or more individual tax for the state, locality, or other taxing agencies. What is the total rate you will charge? I'm going to say it's going to be 9.5%. 9.5%. What if I use a formula? Okay, how many individual rates make up the total rate? Now, this would depend on, again, if you're like in California, you'd have the California and then the local tax and whatnot. So I'm just going to say 1 for the purposes of our example problem. Whatever region you're in, that's going to be what drives your tax rate. So you have to determine that based on your area, and it'll change from state to state, locality to locality. For our practice problem, we're going to be choosing the 9.5. Next, you will need the sales tax agency that make up the sales tax. I'm going to say, okay, next. And you are usually required to report the taxes you've collected to one or more state, local, or other taxing agencies. So sales tax agency ID, I'm just going to say it's going to be 555555. Let's say, and say okay. And then sales tax agency name, sales tax collector. Again, this is a generic agency name, clearly. Which vendor do you send the taxes you're collecting to? So the vendor we're going to be sending them to is going to be our California tax collector. That's the vendor, that's who we pay to. So when we're going to make a payment, who is a vendor, who in this case, the vendor, the person we pay to is not, we're not buying anything, we don't get anything. It's the tax collector who's going to take stuff. So how are your sales tax calculated for the agency? So I'm going to say it's going to be a single rate. So I'm going to use a rate. And then again, it's going to be the 9.5. I'm going to say 9.5. Select an account to track your sales tax. So now we're going to select the account to track the sales tax, which I would believe would be the sales tax payable account. So sales tax payable. which has already been set up in our chart of accounts. We have the sales tax payable account. So select the account to track sales tax payable. All right. And then I'm going to say next. And then it says, you have successfully entered the sales tax agency for this sales tax. Enter an ID and a name, then click finish to save. After you click finish, the sales tax will be effective and can be used on invoice, quotes, and forms. So sales tax ID, I'm going to say California tax. For my purposes in California, because we're in Beverly Hills, 90210. So sales tax name, I'm going to just say the same thing, California tax. And do you charge sales tax on freight? And I'm just going to keep it at the default and say no here. So that would be, you have to check that out for your particular circumstances. So 9.5 being the rate. So here's going to be the sales tax collector. And I'm going to say, all right, let's finish that up. Finishing it up, we have done that, and so we've set up the new sales tax. That looks good. Now I'm going to go to the next item down here. Let's go next, see what else we have. A sales tax is comprised of one or more individual tax rates. We did that, so I'm going to say next. Okay, I'm repeating the process, so I'm going to close this. I'm going to close this, take us back to the wizard. And I'm going to say, are you sure you want? And I'm going to say yes, let's close this. And there we have our sales tax now. It looks like our sales tax is set up. So if it's not, we can go back into it a later time. We'll mess with it again. But I'm going to keep it there. And then I'm going to say next here. So then it says step 3 of 3, assign sales taxes. The final step is setting up sales taxes, assigning the sales tax. In Sage 50, you can assign a sales tax to a customer record or when you create an invoice. You can also do combination of the two depending on your tax needs. To assign sales tax to a customer, click the Assign Sales Tax to Customer button on to go to Maintain Customer Prospects. So assign tax to the customer, so we can go into our item here and assign the tax to the customer. I'm going to keep that as is for now, and then typically we're going to have the tax, of course, when we create like a sales receipt or an invoice. So I'm going to go ahead and say next. Sage 50 lets you set up default information for printing customer statements and sales invoices. This option lets you customize print the options. Here are some of the overall statement and invoice defaults that have been set up for you. So statement of invoice printing options, print company name, address, and so on. Print statement for the customers, activity, and so on. Click the change statement. So if we want to adjust the statements, we can go here. I'm going to keep that as the default. Finish. You have finished setting up your customers. What would you like to do next? We can process jobs, skip, return to the main setup. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's close this out. I'm going to say I want to return to the main setup, and that would take us back to our window here. So I'm going to close this back out and say, okay, that's been done. Let's now take a look at our reports. Let's go to the report dropdown. Let's then go to the financial statements. So within the financial statements, I want to take a look at the balance sheet. So let's open up that balance sheet, and I'll make it, let's just make it for the range of the first month now. So I'm going to take a look at the first month and then say okay. And so there we have it. And if we go back up top, we note that I don't see any accounts receivable yet. So we've entered the balance in the accounts receivable or for the customers not being reflected on the balance sheet yet. So we're going to have to do an adjusting entry for that. Let's take a look at the accounts receivable. So we'll do a beginning balance entry. I don't know if an adjusting entry would be the beginning balance entry for it. If I look at the aged receivables report, let's go back to the aged receivable. It is reflected here. So the aged receivables reflecting the $20,500. And now we need to add that information, of course, to the financial statements. We'll do that with an adjusting journal entry next time. So that's going to be it for now. Let's get out of here.